Hi, this is Jim Ziegler, and this is the Dawg Pound. Okay, we got one heck of a show for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, some of the greatest minds, the futurists, the greatest thought leaders in the industry. I couldn't get those people, but I did get Pasch and Benstock. We're going to have one great show today. Brian Kramer will be back with us. He's having a little connection problem right now, but he'll be back with us. And from New York, Max Zanan.
Hey, Jim. Thank you for having me.
You ready for the subject?
Sure. I'm not politically correct, so I think I'm going to be...
I'm
really ready.
And from the Horn Automotive Group, April Simmons.
Hey, I am super excited about this one. So ready to rock on and get this party started.
Oh, this party is definitely going to start. And from PCG, back. Are you in Napa today?
No, I'm in New Jersey today. So
I'm sorry.
Just like Napa. Yeah.
Okay, coming back from Napa, you have to. It's like one of those aperitifs where you have to cleanse your palate. In New Jersey.
That's right. Yeah, it's like a detox. It's a post-Napa detox.
Brian Pasch and one of the most brilliant women in the car business, Jennifer Briggs. Hi, kid.
Hey, Jim. How are you? Glad to be back on the show this week.
Oh, glad you're back. You feeling okay?
I'm feeling so much better. Still a little, not 100%, but good enough to be here for this conversation. Can't miss it.
And the number one Honda and Acura dealer in the universe, my friend, Brian Benstock. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Jim. How are you? Good to see all of you and good to be here with you.
Okay, with the subject today is the manufacturers seem to be shuffling and making a lot of moves to divest themselves of the dealers. Built to order is not really working, although that they're trying to create the illusion that it's working. And first of all, let's talk about what's happening in Europe. Brian, what's happening? Pasch.
Yeah, so we've seen, and Brian Benstock was just over in Holland. We've, both of us have spent some time over there. Stellantis 2 years ago canceled all their dealer contracts. In Holland, we were talking to dealers, and they basically said Stellantis invited them to come back, told them that they would pay a fraction of the overhead of their showroom because they only needed a few display models, and still no clarity on the compensation, meaning how much they would be paid per car.
That's a big issue, Brian. What's the compensation going to be? They made the dealers build these mausoleums, these giant showrooms, and now you got a 50,000, 100,000 foot showroom, and they want 3,000 feet. Yeah. Brian Benstock, what are you seeing?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I saw. I mean, I saw a gentleman that built a Mercedes-Benz dealership that had 40,000 square feet. And he was, told that this is what was appropriate to support the brand. And he's an absolutely incredible representative of the Mercedes brand. He's a person that measures his wealth with a B, a billionaire. And I say that only because I think if it can happen to him, it can happen to us. And when they talked to him about the agency model, they said, in fact, that we're going to, as Brian Pasch said, going to reimburse you for a portion of your showroom space. And they estimated that to be about 7,000 square feet. Can you imagine?
Down from 40,000.
Can you imagine when he's paying the overhead, they said we need 40,000 square feet. When they're paying it, they say, well, we only need 7,000. Hey, we've been telling them for a long time, we don't need to take all of these cars you've been sending us. There's only, we want to just deal in the most popular ones as well. And, certainly, you have to take the good with the bad. So, I think that they're being a little bit strong-handed and heavy-handed over there in Europe. And I'm not quite sure that they can do the same thing here.
But it looks like they have that intention. Brian Kramer, what are you seeing? Well, Brian, your sound is off.
Nope, can't hear you yet.
Okay. I'm going to go to Max Zanan for a second. Max, what's happening?
I'll give you an example from history. A Glass-Steagall Act was enacted in 1933 to separate commercial banking from investment banking because of the Great Depression and the damage that combination did. And these bankers, they were really trying to repeal the Glass-Steagall Act, and they were working on it for 66 years. And eventually in 99, Bill Clinton repealed the Glass-Steagall Act, and again, commercial banking is together with investment banking. So the point that I'm trying to make is that I don't think this is the first time manufacturers secretly wanted to break the franchise laws. I think finally the masks are off and they're actually saying the thing out loud.
They pushed all the chips out to the center. They're all in. I mean, every one of them, you know, every one of them is going. And Farley says, "Oh no, we're not going to get rid of the dealers," but it sure looks to me like Ford is the leader of the movement in the U.S. to divest themselves of the dealers. They've divided into two corporations, and the electric corporation is pretty well not subject to franchise laws in most states, thanks to Tesla. So they've got a model of the BEV that is not subject or governed by the franchise laws. Now, I was reading Automotive Snooze today, and Automotive Snooze, the front page article is about Lenny Bolavia, my good friend. You know Lenny, don't you, Brian?
I do.
You know, well, he's already got the class action rolling right there. There's going to be some class action lawsuits on this thing. You can believe it.
Well, I think we need to slow down with that. You know, I still, you know, not all manufacturers. I think we need to identify what the cause of the separation of the manufacturer.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
And then see if that's still relevant. By the way, all these OEMs are forgetting one small pesky little detail. The customer. What about the customer? Can the customers afford this, right? Do the customers want this? And, you know, search may be up for BEV vehicles because you can't get an ICE vehicle. And by the way, one other thing, forget this umbrella of we're doing it for the environment, okay?
Yeah.
It's nonsense. The carbon footprint of an electric car is greater than that of an ICE car, period. So you're screwing up the environment every time you drive one of those.
When did we ever believe the manufacturer was doing it for the consumer? When did that mythology ever happen?
The environment, you know, so they're 0 for 2 on this here. And by the way, what about that last little piece of the puzzle? If you had an increase of 15% of the cars on the road being electric vehicles, you'd melt the grid nationally. So until they start pouring cement and building more infrastructure for this, by the way, and what's that infrastructure look like? It looks a lot like a coal or an oil or a nuclear fired power plant. Until you've done that, and until you find a place to put these BEVs, I think it is the future, but slow down. Pump.
Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like I've said this every single time we've talked about this, and it's been a hot topic lately, is the American consumer, the average consumer, not the want buyer, the need buyer, which is over 70% of them. They cannot afford to wait for a vehicle. They need a car when they need it now. They have to get to work. They got to get the kids to school. And I think when you're looking at the end consumer, this is a model where, hey, I don't like my franchisees, or I don't like this image. I want to reduce the expense. I want to reduce the output, but you're not thinking about the end consumer. And that never bids well for any business.
No. Brian Kramer, you back?
No, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Brian.
Oh, no.
He said, he thought he had it fixed.
Yeah. So,
April, what's your thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, so, you know, I agree with Benstock there. And I really liked the letter that Brian Pasch sent to Farley, because I think it hit a super lot of points. But there were two things that I'll add. I believe in playing chess and checkers at the same time. You have to play both games in our business. And, you know, chess is the EV side of this. That's a long play game. It's about thinking about the future, planning for the future, but not necessarily like we're not there yet. You know, I'm not going to get super excited about EVs and get too crazy worried about it until I see a shovel in the ground. I'm telling my husband this weekend, I was getting so fired up about all this stuff. And I said, do you see a shovel in the ground building the next power plant? I don't see a power plant going up. So until that happens, we need to stay focused on our core business, and our core business is fuel economy is important right now. Gas prices are $6 a gallon. So people care about gas. That's why they're looking at EVs. It's all about what's happening right here, right now. but tomorrow that may not be the case. So it is a small percentage of what's going on right now. Stay focused on customer experience. Stay focused on getting fuel economy vehicles on your lot that you can sell right now today. And then we start these conversations about EV. The rest
I gotta say,
done.
the manufacturers have a failed concept in built to order. First of all, built to order is not going to work.
I'll tell you what, Jim.
I fell into this document last week. This particular document is a threat from Ford to their dealers. This is an internal document that says basically we will punish you if people back out of their built to order. So it's what they call a name match. If the names don't match now, and they took away the 120-day rule. In other words, if it takes more than 120 days to produce a vehicle, the dealer will still be punished. And third offense, they will be divested of all their allocations.
For a year.
They're going to take all their allocations away from them.
It's disgusting.
And as we sat here, I you get the little pop-ups of your emails. So I've had one email pop up, and guess what it was? A cancellation of my Ford order. Why? Because people can't wait.
People don't wait. They're not going to wait for Ford. Can't even tell them. And these little pimply-faced reps they got out there, fresh out of college, don't know poop about poop. I mean, I'm telling you right now, Brian Pasch, what do you think?
Jim, I think in the article I wrote to Farley, it has over 4,000 views, hundreds of comments, private and public. What I think is missing is our industry has to talk about the innovations that exist today, right? So there are a group of dealers who are making it easy to buy a car online, who are very price transparent. And here's what's missing. In those ideal environments where they're advertising a new way to buy, home delivery, Brian Benstock's, home pickup and service, all of those things, still at the end of the day, less than 10% of their total sales. With it could be one price, one person, total transparent, less than 10% of the cars are sold completely by home delivery. And what I think is missed.
And that's, Brian, let me interrupt you a second. Yeah. That's because the consumers aren't doing it, not because the dealers aren't trying to make the effort.
No, that's my point. But here's all the comments. Oh, I got ripped off for a dealer, or I got MSRP plus, and that's why Jim Farley's protecting the consumer. And I'm like, listen, there's always bad apples. There's always a bell curve of excellence. But if we looked at today, even if technology got better and supply increased, I couldn't see more than 30% of the consumers wanting to buy a car and have it home delivered. So what I think Farley's doing is playing to the investment community and trying to finish the job of creating Ford EV as a separate company to get Tesla's valuation. And I think it's a fool's errand for him to make the case.
Well, let's go back to where Farley got started. When I first met Jim Farley, he was the CEO of Scion. How'd that work out for you?
Well, I was the top Scion dealer. I can tell you a lot about Scion and where their failures were on that. And ask me, April, how did you sell so many Scions? I'm going to tell you, because this will go to my point of why they're making a big mistake right now. They came out and they said, look, you should only have these certain salespeople that sell Scion. They wanted 3 people at the store. They're going to be these.
It was all about the experience.
Right? Okay. So when they said, April, how do you sell so many Scions? I said, well, I let every single salesperson sell them. Every single person.
Yeah. And when Scion launched, it was going to be the millennial vehicle. I mean, guess what? All the old fart senior citizens like me bought them. The kids didn't buy them.
We need to be careful. I don't want the people on this stage to be accused of being dinosaurs and living in the past. I believe that we need to lean into the future. I fully support using the best and the latest technologies to help our environment be clean. The easiest way and the most frictionless way for a customer to purchase a car, supporting that and working with the manufacturer. But when I see CEOs with credible positions and credible voice talking about eliminating us, it sort of makes us, put our hair up. And then I say, hey, that's a great opportunity. I think Ford should go right ahead and do that. I think Ford should eliminate their dealers so that we can eat their lunch. The guys over at Honda, we love it because we'll have more distribution outlets. We'll have a better way of doing it. We'll have people that have skin in the game selling the cars. Remember that skin in the game deal? That really counts, right? That somebody like me is in a store 7 days a week, making sure those products get sold and delivered. And so try doing it without skin in the game. And when there's failures with the products, and we know that there will be failures with the products, the dealers are usually the ones that pick up the ball from there. So
We've done it so many times.
I don't want anyone to accuse us of being dinosaurs.
No, not at all. I mean,
whatever.
We're leaning into the future. We've changed with every new wave. Brian Kramer, have you got your audio back?
Not
No,
yet.
you're not.
No.
Okay. Most of us are leaning into the future. There's some
Right.
Brian Kramer is going to be a mime.
Right. Brian Kramer is not leaning into the future.
He's leaning in right now, Max. Leave him alone.
I love his
We can't hear you,
palm
Brian.
trees back there. Technologies. He's got to put some antennae on those palm trees to get better reception.
Okay, so let's talk about the tenets of what's happening here. Number one, they're envisioning one price. One price. I've advocated one price recently because if you're going to sell online, you've got to basically be one price. Okay, we agree with that.
Oh, hang on a second. We don't all agree.
I don't agree to that.
Hey, Jim, who started the negotiation game? I would love to have been selling my cars all these years for one price, and that price be MSRP. I'm good with that. I wasn't the one that wanted to discount the price.
I invented the Foursquare.
But unfortunately, sometimes the manufacturers produce a few too many cars, and remember the good old days 2 years ago, 3 years ago. If you added up all the production numbers from all the OEMs, the SAR would be at 25 million. And so they produce based on that false narrative, and we're the ones that have to mop up the excess supply, and sometimes that leads to discounting. I think if the supplies were constrained, that would hold the line. The question is that, and would that be better for the consumers?
I'm talking about their online sales now. That's got to be one price. Or,
Yeah, I agree, but we're not the ones to break that covenant, are we?
No, not at all. And but the built to order part of the equation, and they're forcing the dealers to go with built to order. That's the wedge. And I know the consumers won't wait. I mean,
They won't.
and I mean they want instantaneous gratification and inventory on the ground, as Brian Benstock just pointed out. Inventory on the ground sells cars.
We've been learning how to deliver cars in less time than ever. We can get a transaction done in about 36 minutes, soup to nuts. And people like the ability to get it sooner, faster. Look at Federal Express was overnight, and then Amazon Prime was overnight. And now look at what Apple's doing. You can buy an Apple product and in many cases have it delivered to you within 2 hours. So, I don't think, I'm not quite sure how we're going to change the world when it comes to buying an automobile. Everybody else is working on how to give it faster to the consumers, how to know the customers better, how to wow them everywhere. And the automobile industry seems to be going in the opposite direction. It's going to take you.
I don't agree with that. I think dealers are making a supreme effort. The vendors have painted us to be the evil 20-year out of date stereotypes. I mean, most dealers don't fit that stereotype. Brian Pasch, what are you seeing?
Well, listen, there's a bell curve. I had a friend of mine buy a dealership last month. The dealership had no CRM. Okay, now they were selling 50 cars a month, but still in 2022, a Ford store with no CRM. Okay, come on, like that's a joke. But those are the people who often are called out as the dinosaurs. And as Brian Benstock said, we had a rep from Paragon Acura speak at our conference. It was one of the most compelling stories of transformation. How do you take a number one store and destroy it and build even better? These narratives are not going out. And what's happening, it looks like the media is only portraying the 3 to 4 hour deal, negotiation, MSRP plus, taking advantage of consumers. And let's just say that has been.
I'm saying that is not the majority of dealers today.
Correct.
There was a time. I've been hanging around for 48 years.
That's not the narrative that's being displayed. And more importantly, no one is arguing, as Brian said, that we're evolving and we need to change. But I would say the most efficient dealership has to in the country, probably top 10 most efficient has to be Paragon. And Brian, what percentage of your customers, new and used, want a completely out of dealership experience?
You're probably looking about 12% right now, and that's
there we go. The best in the country, and it doesn't get to 100%, and that's the weird thing. Like, how
Brian,
accelerate?
We offer it to 100%. We offer it to 100% of the customers,
Right.
And about 25% or so start that way, and then they prefer. We're getting down to about 16%. That's new and used, and it's not that we're not capable. During COVID, we delivered 100% of our cars. It was about 700 cars plus a month, 100% delivered to the consumer. But as things opened up, the consumer opted to touch and feel the car.
Okay, so what we're dealing with is a manufacturer that really doesn't understand the consumer. They're operating with surveys, and consumers don't say what they mean.
Exactly.
I'm going to tell you, I have
Well, or
experienced
it's a
that.
loaded question on the survey. Let's talk about that. Do you remember that one presenter at Digital Dealer a few weeks ago, Jim? Loaded questions on the survey to fit their narrative. But again, I feel like I'm always the advocate for the average American here. And for me, I guess, I know, Max, it's a utopian thing because I've always delivered cars all over the lower 48 ever since I started in this business, because we're just serving a customer. Those of us who realize it's the relationship and that we're selling that experience, not a piece of metal, are the ones. And Brian had made a comment that nobody is out there not advocating against change or speaking up. But I think
None of us are advocating against change.
We do it every day, every week for those who are constantly evolving. It's like we forget to talk about it because we're too busy doing it in the moment. But I know even myself, who I like to think I'm cutting edge, this year, I have had to adjust and pivot at least 5 times on different strategies because of things happening in the markets. We are always adapting. And that image that people have, sure, there are some of those folks out there that are still doing it the wrong way.
But I don't think that's the issue today.
Right.
That's
Why
not
are
the
we
issue
being
today.
apologetic?
No, the issue today is will this fail? Will this work? Are they going to get rid of the dealers? That's the issue today.
But I think
the customer experience has
we're
been,
going to use that as a justification to get rid of the dealers. I think.
Well, yeah, but that's not really flying it. The built-to-order thing is all economics. It's all infatuation with Tesla.
Well, guys,
I thought it was the dealer experience that he was interested in revolutionizing.
Well, I think we could agree that there needs to be a change in the relationship between the OEM and the dealers. I think we're going to have to be flexible, and the OEMs are going to have to be flexible. I don't think the OEMs should come out and say that we're going to do this. They shouldn't have a heavy hand. We should be fluid. We should be agile, and really continue to focus on what's in the best interest of the consumer, and making sure that the dealers do it the way that is in the best interest of the consumer, and that the manufacturers do the same. Look at what many of the manufacturers are doing right now. Are they concerned about the customers? Many of the manufacturers are producing the most expensive cars that they have so that they can participate profitably in what's going on. So the lower price cars be damned. We're going to produce the cars we make the most money on. So, they're sort of talking out of both sides of their mouth. And I have to say, there are some OEMs that are committed to the dealer network. And I've heard Toyota is one. of them.
Yeah.
I've heard Honda are amongst them.
Kia.
And Kia is doing some fantastic things. And I think you get 1,100 dealer entrepreneurs helping you to lean into the future. I think you're much better off than having an oligarch disguised as a CEO telling you how the customers are going to buy the car. Want my car? Here's how you're going to buy it. Well, remember, they always forget. Consumers say no, and they vote with their wallet. And so we got to be real careful.
Brian, you've got the #1 Honda Acura dealer in the country.
See this thing here? A customer can deselect you with their right thumb or their left. But most of them use their right thumb, and they can just say, "Oh, okay, no, I'm going to right here." And the customers, are all powerful. And I think when we forget that, I think we miss the point.
Brian, you're the #1 Honda dealer in the country. Let me ask you a question. Do all your New York customers have perfect, impeccable credit, and you don't have to work the banks to get the deals bought?
It's my obligation to do the best that I can to get the best transaction for the customer. But many times the banks make mistakes. The banks aren't aware.
But do you have to work the banks to get the deals bought?
Well, of course we do. Of course.
But where's the manufacturer got that in their equation? Where is that in the equation?
Jim, those are the soft nuances that people sometimes don't understand about our business, and they learn the hard way. I mean, look what Ford did in upstate New York with their auto, whatever they had there.
Collection.
It was a collection, all right. They were collecting cars on the lot for months. The only problem with that is you're supposed to sell the cars, and they had everything, every detail buttoned up, every department, every job description of everything. They just didn't know how to operate a retail operation. But now all of a sudden they think they've figured it out, and I would argue that they have not figured that out.
Let me ask April a question. April, why is this going to fail?
Well, it's going to fail for a multitude of reasons. First of all, I think they're making a lot of decisions right now. We talk about garbage in, garbage out when we talk about CRMs and things of that nature. And I think they're taking a lot of data information over the last couple of years where people were making decisions out of no other choice, not because they would have chose to have their car delivered at home, or they would have chose to buy this car versus that car. Now you add the $6 gallons of gas, and people are talking about EVs more than ever just because they can't afford to get to work now that they're going back to work. But the biggest reason it'll fail is the art of the salesperson. I always believe in painting a picture to sell, so I'm going to paint a picture. How did a customer actually validate this? They went online to do to build a car and to look at their payment, to put in their trade-in, and they got to the end and the payment said $500. And they said, well, man, I've always bought this car and I need this payment around $385. And guess what they did? They gave up. They said, well, I can't get the payment I need, because most people, guess what, are still payment buyers. So they went and bought a different manufacturer's vehicle, turned around, brought that vehicle in, hated it, just hated it. Brought it in, was in the service drive, said, man, I really wanted to get that car, but it couldn't happen. Salesperson intervened, went out there, did a trade appraisal, extended the term, lowered the rate, the things that salespeople do to do what? To get the customer satisfaction, which was to get them in the car that the customer wanted. It's still an emotional situation, and the salesperson has to be involved.
The deal's got to be worked. I mean, we have to work the deal.
So what if happens in the showroom? What if happens on the phone? And what if does happen on the computer? But it takes the salesperson interjecting into that conversation to help guide them from start to finish.
That customer coming in with a perfect 780 credit score, okay, that'll work under this premise. But that customer coming in with a 540 credit score that has a real good story about why, and I have to present that to the lender.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share, because both Brian and Jennifer made a point that every day we're evolving. And I just want to contrast a good OEM relationship with a dealer and the poor ones, like we've seen with Stellantis and the decisions with Ford. And you could even say GM with their EV vehicles.
We should be saying GM. We're concentrated on Ford because Ford's out front with us.
GM's
doing the same
thing. But here's an example. When Toyota said they were going to build SmartPath, they went to their dealers and said, we're going to build a digital retailing tool, but we know it's not going to be good day one. go buy Gubagoo, Car Now, Roadster, whatever you want, because here's what they said. You're going to need to learn how to deal with customers remotely. Year 2, they came out and kept on training their dealers, and they showed SmartPath version 2. And they said, look, it's still not great, but look, here's where we're going. The latest version of SmartPath that I saw, I was like, ooh, if I was a Toyota dealer, man, that start has some meat on the bone. And you know what they did, Brian? It's still not ready. Well, here's what they did. They kept on showing the dealers where they were going, and they encouraged them to develop a modern sales process. Now, eventually, a lot of dealers will pick SmartPath. Some may not. But here's their approach. If we all work at improving the sales experience for Toyota, we all win.
It's a laboratory, Brian.
Throat, then the dealers natural, the entrepreneurs are going to push back. So I think Toyota is one of the best examples of bringing their body together for a modern retail experience.
Well,
Yeah.
Brian Pasch, as you know, Stellantis pretty well divested themselves of, would they give them a 2-year window in Europe?
Yeah.
I mean, and they don't ever for a moment think they're not going to bring that to the U.S. I mean, that's the test laboratory.
You know, I think with Toyota, what Brian Pasch was speaking about with Toyota, and I think Honda's taking a similar path. You know, what better way to get market data than from your 1,100 or 12 or Toyota 2,000 dealers banging their heads up against the wall to come up with the best solution to satisfy our customers, and that business model, I think, is the pathway forward, and that's what makes this is a great horse race, right?
Yeah.
That's what makes this. Hey, Ford, go ahead, man. You tried it before, and lots of good luck. Good on you. But you're going to be up against entrepreneurs that are
Ford's going to crash hard. Ford is going to crash hard.
Maybe not. Maybe they'll figure it out. But in relation to what you were saying before, and April and Jim, I think we're getting caught up in the weeds. What do you do with a 580 score? What do you do with a 700 score? I'm willing to bet.
Really?
I'm willing to bet on technology, that we can come up with technology solutions that will solve for that. And
It's just an if then else statement. It's not programmatically. It's not that complicated.
It's not, and ultimately the approval is going to come from a person and or a machine or an algorithm. So I think we can solve for that. April's talk about the relationship and how important that is when purchasing a product like a car. I agree with that, but more and more, less and less people are interested in that. And I think we have to very much, Apple's coming into the game. Can we just do it the way they're going to do it? And we all know instinctively how they're going to do it. They're going to have people that take this deal from cradle to grave, one person, right? One price. They're going to have
but I don't think that takes the relationship out. It's not the same.
No. But hear me out. They're going to have that in-store experience in a store that's a temple to the brand. We can test drive it, spin it around, experience the car. And they're also going to have a similar, this is in my head, right? I have no inside information, but they're also going to have a similar experience where you can experience that online and let the customer pick the way they want to go. Apple is smart enough to do that. Is Ford? I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
But giving the customers multiple pathways that to excite them and to get them into the process, I think is the way to go. Instead of saying you have to do this, and so I do think the experience that we have and we enjoy with Apple, we should be working on bringing that to our industry.
You see
What
this
you got,
Apple?
April?
This is my Apple phone that I went in and purchased. And guess what this Apple phone is? Not the one I went in to purchase. You know why? Because they didn't have the one that I wanted in stock. So, I think that you're
April,
right.
Did you buy that phone online?
No, I walked right into the store. You know why? Because I didn't want to wait 3 days to get it.
I bought one online, and it was so analogous to purchasing a car, what the ultimate car buying experience should be like. I was able to give them my trade-in, to evaluate the trade-in. The steps were incredibly similar, with the exception of the credit step, because there was no credit involved in my particular trade. But I can see us imitating that. And one other point, we talk about these companies like Tesla. We talk about these companies like Carvana that do it online. How are they doing? How is their bottom line doing? So before all these guys want to chase that, remember Tesla significant incentives, government incentives assisting them, and it's only recently that they were making a profit. And Brian Pasch, I'm not sure if you were told this in the Netherlands, but in the Netherlands last year, Tesla sold 200,000 plus Teslas. It's a pretty good number. This year to date, they had about 2,300 sold. The only difference was the government incentives went away. So they went from 200,000 to 2,000 or 3,000, and that's a big difference. And in addition to that, all these other little guppies are coming in and taking market share. So right now they've got a monopoly in the EV space. And they've got an EV space at a time where we don't have ICE availability. Wait till you've got several hundred models out there, and you look at an EV technology in a Porsche, and you look at the EV technology in a Tesla. There ain't no comparison. Remember, our manufacturers have been making these cars for a lot of years, and they've got things figured out. So before they abandon the dealers, they need to just take a reality check and look at what's actually going on.
Well, here's the question to the group. Let me pose the question. Well, what happens to the dealers? Okay, let's pretend that General Motors and Ford both crash hard, which I'm predicting. This is going to be a hard crash because they've totally committed to electric and they've abandoned ICE, and the consumers haven't abandoned ICE. But let's say they crash. Well, what happens to the dealers? All of us that have invested all this money, some of the grandfathers shook hands with Henry Ford and made lifelong commitments. They've invested in the franchise. What happens to the dealers? Jennifer, what happens to
Jim,
the dealers?
let me answer that question because I'm not a dealer, and I think I can say certain
Oh
things.
yeah, because I was gonna say something spicy.
That Brian and Jennifer and April are not in a position to say, right? Because I personally thrive on a conflict, right? And what you have here is an ultimate FU from Ford.
Oh,
right?
It's a fustercluck.
Right. And if you're a dealer, you don't need to be apologetic about your sales process. You need to understand that they're really going after your lively, your business, right? Brian Benstock mentioned last time, right, that what OEM sees is the 17,000 rooftops multiplied by their net profit. They see it as theirs.
Yes.
Right? You have to defend what's yours. And how do you do it? Listen, maybe you do hire Eleni Bolivia, right? Or maybe you do it across a franchise line, and 4 dealers band together, right? And get the best law firm on a retainer. So
there's going to be lawsuits. I don't know where it's going to come from, but there's going to be lawsuits.
Right. You need to get the best PR company on a retainer, because this is a public relations campaign, because dealers do a lot of good things in the community. Something that we need to bring this to the forefront.
We need to work with Max. We need to work with the OEMs. We need
and ask them what they're trying to
Brian,
accomplish.
I strongly disagree. Disagree.
First of all, pray for peace, prepare for war. We need to work with them and understand their position. We need to put our CEO hats on from the manufacturer and understand what they're after, and we know it's additional profitability is to help them with that, and they need to put the dealer hat on and understand what we're facing.
But they're not reaching out to the dealers.
Well, I think
they are to certain dealers.
I think Mr. Farley's initial shot over the bow is to have a conversation just like this start, and it's not cost them anything to say they're doing this.
I think Farley's brilliant, but I've really got a problem with this. Kramer, you got sound?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Here we go, baby. So, God, that was frustrating.
Jump into conversation.
Customers must have felt before I went digital.
Okay, Brian Kramer, Germain Toyota, Naples, Florida, Germain Lincoln.
So here's what I think, and obviously, like Brian, I've been on the backside of some of these conversations, and I can see both sides of the deal. And Honda's a different animal than, let's say, Ford, because Ford, you've got 3,000 plus dealers. Lincoln, you have 623 dealers. You probably don't need 623 Lincoln dealers. In Miami, you have 1 dealer, and in Philadelphia, you have like 16. And that doesn't make sense. And it's because way back when they were giving out gas stations or Standard Oil, fueling stations, and they gave them to whoever, everybody that wanted one got one, and they just never right-sized it the way that they did with the Europeans. Europeans come out, Studebaker transitions to Mercedes. They don't have as much of a footprint. And then you think about down south in Florida, for instance, it didn't really boom until the 70s. So there's less oversaturation of dealers. You had Jim Moran that he knew that throughput was the key to a healthy dealer network. And I think that's why Southeast Toyota is so successful. But that's also why Honda, Toyota are able to be more successful, because they're more collaborative with their dealers, and it's less of this. And there's some Lincoln dealers that don't sell a car every month.
Oh, it's like it's a partnership.
Imagine
There's no collaboration on this. Farley just came out with both guns blazing, and he didn't shoot a shot over the bow. He shot right through the bow.
But at least he's doing something. I don't know that I agree with what he's doing, but I know that at least he's doing something. There's a lot of dealers that want to tear him apart, but don't want to offer a better solution. And
Good
I
point.
think it's like what Brian Pasch said. And Brian Benstock just said, what do you want? We'll try to help you get there, but you need to be more clear in terms of not just the vision, but the execution is really what
Keep in mind what happened with Tesla. Their service is miserable. Carvana, their service is miserable. So there's key collaborations that are going to continue to be necessary. I believe that we're vital in the process of distribution of vehicles. As the means of distribution improve, there is going to be a need for less of us. So we have to get our heads around that. That's not overreach by the factory. That's, there are dealers right now or in the past that haven't fulfilled their obligation to be retail sales effective. And I know that number can be very controversial. And so, but if a dealer is constantly not hitting the mark, the OEM may very well look to say, hey, maybe it's time for you to have that hard conversation. It's time for you to go. And that's fair. And I think we need a change at the leadership representing us. I think NADA has got a long way to go.
Oh my gosh! Yes.
I don't believe we're getting proper representation. And I know behind the scenes there's probably a lot of what's going on. I'm just not aware of them.
Brian, when you go to the NADA convention and you see who the sponsors are and where the finances are coming from, you know who runs NADA. They lived off the battlefield a long time ago.
When I was a young guy, I remember some of the guys that were in charge of NADA, and man, those guys were icons. Those guys,
Frank McCarthy.
Those guys were solid.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Tonkin, when he was there, he was the right person at the right time.
The Rough Riders.
Yeah. And I think we need some. Well, I don't want to say different leadership, but we need to be this is going to call for different kind of management at that
level. Their attorneys are getting in their way, Brian.
Well, then fire the attorneys.
To make a move.
Fire the attorneys. We don't have the clout that we used to have politically. Big tech does. And also at the dealer level, if you look at the National Dealer Advisory Boards for many OEMs, those people that are at the top of those boards are interested in playing golf, going on the trips, and having nice conversations. And not all, but many of those dealers are not in the game. They're not in the hunt.
No, they're bell cow dealers. They're bell cows for the factory initiative.
And so we need people. We need the William Wallaces of the world putting on paint and saying, okay,
put that black shit under your eyes. Get ready.
Sometimes just rub lipstick.
And we're not in this against the OEM. We want you to know we're rolling up our sleeves, and we're with you in trying to work out solutions.
And Brian, that's why I wrote that open letter to Jim, and I hope he responds, because the questions were not an attack. It's just, okay, based on your vision.
It was brilliant. That letter you wrote is brilliant.
Help us fill in the blanks, because listen, one of the things up until recently, dealers weren't really making money on new cars. Now at MSRP they are, but we relied on the used car trade to make deals work, right? And in this big consumer direct model, the huge unknown is, how are trades being handled? Does Ford take in the trades? Does the dealer even see a penny of F&I income? And of course, Jim can say, we'll get that information worked out over the coming months. That's why I asked him to week in November at our
So Brian,
conference.
I have seen behind the curtains on that particular program.
Yeah.
Go
And they
ahead.
still, and one of the holes in it is they still leave it to certain vendors, and I'm preaching to the choir, that ballpark trades, they range trades, they don't give an exact number that somebody's going to back up and stand behind. And when they're doing that, it's counterintuitive to a seamless process at 2 a.m. to be able to transact. To your point, the appraisal is the number one friction point, but they don't have the end solution or advocating a company, like an AccuTrade or somebody that can, or I guess they will facilitate ICO, but not everybody's got it set up correctly in order to, as you know,
Brian, finance and trade appraisal are the two friction points.
Yes. Yeah.
Finance.
Yes.
Finance.
F&I products and the credit application.
All of those things, all of those can be built and solved for. Keep in mind, you can't call Amazon, you can't call Google, you can't call Facebook, yet they handle 99.9% of the challenges that they have online. And I think we can do the same thing. So I wouldn't hang my hat on that. I remember a time, it seems like not too long ago, when we said public corporations will never figure out how to sell cars. They don't quite understand how each transaction is negotiated belly button to belly button. And sure enough, they have figured it out. Now they figured it out, not quite at the level of the experienced dealer, but they have figured it out at scale better than the average dealer. So, hats off to them, because a lot of us thought they'd never be able to get that, including the F&I piece. So I'm hearing the same conversation happen. I wouldn't bet against them not being able to.
No, the F&I piece and the trade are the two friction points. So it's still.
And I agree with Brian. It's going to be figured out. All I was trying to elevate was, how can dealers plan for the future? What about a dealer who's going through?
Brian Pasch, let me ask you a question, Brian Pasch.
Yeah.
How can they get a copy of that letter?
Sure. They can just go to my LinkedIn profile, and you'll see my Modern Retailing newsletter, and the last post was there. And it is hopefully being continually forwarded to Ford. And I'm hoping
like LinkedIn.com/Brian Pasch.
Yeah. And the idea here is, and I agree with Brian, we're going to work out a lot of the technical things, but it's not what consumers 100% want to do. And number two, how can dealers plan? I'm just advocating for more transparency for the Ford dealer who's being told that he has to invest $20 million in a facility refresh, where 2 years from now he's going to be downscaled. Or I'm looking for
Brian. They're not going to be facility improvements. It's going to be process. So all the stuff you've been preaching for years is what I saw a glimpse of is going to be mandated on what they should be doing, and not doing this. A lot of the stuff that we all know we should be doing anyway,
right,
from a process standpoint. But it's not going to be capital expenditures. It's going to be more painful than that. It's going to be change and doing things that they haven't always done.
Listen, we've been pioneering, along with folks like Brian Benstock and others, coaching dealers about modern retailing. And tell you the truth, one of the problems of the inventory shortage is massive profits have gotten a lot of people fat and lazy. And so when I heard the amazing presentation, Brian, what was the gentleman? I forget his name.
Murat Deljanin.
Yeah, Murat. Murat basically said, look, we were top in the country, and we realized we still had to tear it down and rebuild it. That is an odd exception to the rule at maximum profit. Yet it's exactly what we need to do to reimagine automotive retail. And I think, as Brian said, some OEMs are collaborating, and we're going to get there faster than legal courtrooms and class action lawsuits. I'm just hoping
we don't want it to get there. We don't want it to get there, Brian. But now I get this. I see this letter from Ford. We're going to punish the dealer severely if built to order doesn't work. I mean, don't threaten.
But Jim, I'm listen. I know a little bit about that letter. I think it's a good letter, and it's about freaking time.
Really?
But yeah, I'll tell you why. They're talking about dealers gaming the system, and that's what they're talking about. They're talking about Fido Benstock, Jane Benstock, Sarah Benstock buying Broncos so that Benstock gets the best allocation of Broncos. That's not there. And I think there should be penalties. In our market in New York, you've got these dealers that are selling cars to brokers and pretending they're retailing cars. So I hope they get a $10,000.
Well, I see New York is a different market. Brokers are all over New
Well,
York.
in Florida too. So I hope the
Yeah.
brokers get their.
I agree with that 100%. But by the same token, Brian, there are customers that legitimately back out of the deals because they can't get in.
And we've got to make allowances for that too, right? But I think the spirit of that was in dealers that are going to game the system.
And we agree with the spirit of that.
Right. So let's say
disagree.
let's say that, right? I think Ford has a right to manage their business, and I think we have a right to manage our business. And if the rules are clearly laid out, then we should be able to follow the rules. And where there's a deviation that needs to be made, like a customer can't afford it, backs out, changes their mind, we need to have a mulligan, a bogey, an opportunity for Ford to investigate. And where the dealer is found to be guilty, well, then the manufacturer can figure out what appropriate sanctions to take.
But did they throw the baby out with the bathwater?
Always. They start out with an untenable position. Hopefully, over time in negotiation, come to a reasonable position.
I remember when Alan Mulally first came into Ford. Ford was in a terrible way. Jack Nasser had decimated.
What a genius!
And I'm walking across the floor. He and I were keynote speakers for the New York Dealers Association convention that year at the Greenbrier. I'm walking across the floor. Jim Ziegler. Jim, I want to spend some time with you, and I want to know what the dealers think. And I had that communication with this brand new president of Ford, CEO of Ford, and they are not reaching out to me or anybody like me that is in the trenches. They're not reaching out to a Brian Benstock, a Brian Kramer, Brian Pasch. They're not reaching out to the people that are talking to the dealers.
Well, here's the good news for Honda. Honda's reaching out to its dealers. Honda, I was saying before, many of these national dealer boards, the members that are elected based on popularity, not on a meritorious vote. And I think we'll rue the day when I see some of these dealers that have a lot of stores that they couldn't tell the difference between a CRM and a DRM. They have no idea. And sadly, these are some of the dealers that are representing us now that we need this as we're going through these tough times. And I think the same is true for NADA. And I'm not casting stones. I'm just saying different times require different leadership.
April Simmons, you got something on your mind?
Yeah, so a couple things. I do agree with both Brian's and don't want to come across as not wanting to grow and innovate, because those have always been two of my biggest words. We grow, we innovate. I mean, I've been doing digital retailing for a decade now. This isn't something that's new. I just think that the one thing we forget about, all the friction points are going to get worked out. There's no doubt about it. And there will be a percentage of people that will buy a car that way. But I think what we have to remember is that as we sit here today, the majority of customers, they have to know what they want in order to go online and buy a car from A to Z. And there are still a majority of customers, at least in my backyard, that come in and they say they want to buy A and they leave in B. And there are many customers today that come in that just don't know what they want. They need somebody to guide them. Remember,
we are totally committed to EV.
Wants and needs and doing those sort of things. And I just feel like EV is a great opportunity. I'm actually going to give Ford some props in this and why I'm not scared about what they're doing. I think they're using this as a beta test, because if you really consider this, it's a small percentage. EV, as we sit here today, is not going to be the majority of what we sell for well over a decade. We don't have the infrastructure for it. It's going to take time.
They have totally committed to EV, which scares me to death.
Well, because it's the time, right? Right now is a good time for them to do it. It's we don't have cars to produce, so we got to talk about something else. So let's.
April,
it also allows them to get around the franchise dealer laws with
listen,
and all these other things.
They're leaning into a math problem that can't come around. It takes. They don't have the infrastructure. They haven't poured enough cement or foundations for these for the grid to expand. In addition to that, it takes 1 acre rare earth. They have to dig up an acre to make a single car. So what does that look like as they're trying to replace 14 million cars a year or 50?
They can't beat these slave kids hard enough.
And so what? Where are we going to dig up 15 million acres a year? And they're the largest resources in the world for battery technology. What country?
China.
Yeah, China. Yeah, so we go
One's in the back.
so we go from dependence on the Middle East to independence from the Middle East, now to potentially dependence on China. What is wrong with us? What is wrong with us? And the amount of advantage that they have is unlike what currently exists in petroleum. We have an edge on the Middle East in petroleum production. China has an unprecedented edge in the earth materials necessary to make car batteries. Is our government and are our factories leading us into total transportation dependence on China? I don't know, guys. It's just a simple. I'm just a simple car salesman. I get it, but the chip shortage, you ain't seen nothing yet compared to the shortage we're going to have in producing.
Brian Kramer, jump in.
Well, solid state batteries is really what we should have waited for. We should have taken hybrids and rode it out a little bit longer. But I just saw in that automotive news article the change in infrastructure with like 5 big states, franchise laws, that one right there. And this isn't about batteries. This isn't about the environment. This isn't about saving anything. This is about getting a few narratives covered. And this is a way to figure out, can we sell direct to consumer? How does Volvo have Polestar? How does, all the other ones, the Scout for Volkswagen, the new Ford thing. I just think Jim Farley is the most transparent.
Would you like to see Farley on this show?
Oh yeah, of course. And
I like to see Farley. Farley, I know you're watching because you commented on the show. Farley, why don't you come on the show, Jim? You and I, you flew me up to Detroit. You took me through the research lab. You've been a friend to me for a long time. I don't think you'll take my calls now because you're pissed at me. But Jim Farley, I'd love to see you on this show. And
if you agree with him, you don't agree with him. At least he's, tell you straight the way it is.
I've always called him my friend. Now he won't take my calls.
No, Brian,
he's not alone.
I agree with you that there's a bigger play, and all I'm trying to develop a dialogue is, how do dealers need to plan? What's the playbook look like? I think it was brilliant for Sonic breaking off used cars in Echo Park as a separate brand that allows them to build micro EV dealerships, keep the used cars separate. I mean, some people were thinking ahead that this retail model is going to have to change. And instead of building $40 million every time you wanted to buy a new franchise.
Micro dealerships, that's a whole other show, I tell you.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, Brian, I agree with you. And what I think is Farley is being absolutely transparent as compared to GM with their EV, same general approach, but no details. What I'm just saying is, let's have an active conversation. And as Brian Benstock mentioned, how do we weave from one extreme to another, some middle ground where we can plan over the next 10 years? How to evolve retail. But the shock and awe just doesn't work for me.
And Brian Pasch, go ahead.
Jim, I've got to leave, but I can give you the bottom line on this, if you allow me.
Yeah.
We're all going to be okay.
Yeah.
We're all going to be okay. Transportation, whenever, wherever, however consumers want to consume it, all of us are going to be okay.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
Listen, Jim, I want to say one thing, because I think we're completely ignoring the fact that EV is code for breaking franchise laws. And, you can be delusional in thinking that he's the most transparent, but he's telling you to your face, I am going to break franchise laws and I'm going to use EVs to do that. So if you're a Ford dealer or a GM dealer or any other franchise dealer, you have to understand there are multiple precedents to break the franchise laws, not just Europe, Tesla in the United States. And unless you hit back and you hit back hard now,
unless you
will
get
lose
with
life.
your dealer associations, your state associations, the national association is not going to carry the fight to the
Right.
To the
You have to fight for your livelihood. And this is what I would do if I'm a Ford dealer. I immediately stop using Ford captive. I immediately
here's
stop
the-
selling
here's the-
Ford
here's the
OEM
problem.
F&I products. Right.
The
I
problem-
hit them in their pocket. You know,
The problem with all of this
hire
is that
the
we don't
best
fight hard
law
enough
firm. I hired
against
the
our
best
own
law
processes.
firm. You know, guys, you have to be proactive and
But
develop.
hang on, Brian Kramer just said something really important, Max.
Brian, jump in there.
We
Kramer.
don't fight as hard against our own processes. We don't fight that hard. When somebody starts trying to move our cheese, yeah, we're going to go lawyer up and we're going to sit there and start going after franchise laws and go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. But we won't spend those hundreds of thousands of dollars to rebuild our infrastructure, to hold our people accountable, to get our own shit together, and start doing business the way that we're going to end up doing business anyway, that we should have been doing business to begin with in a Shopify, Amazon model. It's the conundrum of car dealers that we wait way too long. And it takes that for us to start fighting and start taking the gloves off and getting nasty because we didn't get our house in order to begin with that put us in that situation.
Well, guys, we have burned an hour, and I don't know what we accomplished, but we certainly got a lot of different opinions, a lot of different thought processes out there. This subject is not dead. This subject is not going to go away. And we will, Jennifer, we will be talking about this again. Do you think?
Yes, multiple times. And yeah.
And I wasn't joking a minute ago. I'd love to see Farley on this show.
I'm honestly surprised he didn't try to invite himself after he commented on the.
Okay, everybody wave goodbye to the audience.